On the banks of the River Eye, not far from the centre of Melton Mowbray, and bounded by a new housing estate, lies this patch of countryside. Local industries border the far bank of the river. The railway bridge leads into a small wood, and the railway line, which is still in use, forms a barrier against the encroaching town. Beyond this meadow is the river and a weir. A footbridge over the river leads on through a more open space into marshland. Alongside the bridge is a disused concrete basin, silted up and a natural home for water plants and creatures. These 10 and 11-year-old children are setting out on a field study. The cameras go along to make a spontaneous record of one experience in normal school life. This part of the child's everyday world now becomes a resource for learning, and so their minds are opened to an increased appreciation of familiar surroundings. There has been no detailed pre-planning, but the teacher has examined the possibilities and collected information and materials. Suitably dressed for rough, wet work, each of the 34 children takes a share in the carrying. Before starting out, the position of the site was found on an ordnance survey map, each person supplied with a plan, and the layout studied. The children are asked to get an overall feeling for the area first of all, not to feel that they have to be specific straight away, but to collect impressions and ideas, to explore different aspects and find out what might be of real interest to them. With a reminder about behaving responsibly, the children disperse. Self-discipline is really put to the test when children are out of sight of the teacher. Whenever possible, living things are studied in situ, but if they are taken back, a suitable environment is created. This bullhead, which lives in running water, will be returned to the river. Reference books are used, but identification is not the sole purpose or priority. Observing closely, analysing, questioning and comparing lead to much deeper learning.
Janet, Andrew and I wanted to make a big plan and put all the bridges and things on it. Mr. Morris talked to us about it and we began by measuring the bridge. Angela measured the bridge with a metre trundle wheel. Janet wrote down all we said. Andrew and I both measured the handrail with a metre stick. Angela didn't measure into the corners, so our answers were different. Janet wrote everything down for us.
Diane and I were interested in the plants growing on the bank of the river. Mr. Morris knew quite a lot about them. People often come into the school to help in all kinds of ways. Mr. Paul, he is an environmental studies advisor, joined our group for a few sessions.
Life is great when you know it's great when you're
preparations are now made for school to become a laboratory for further work. Start on a study. Others continue to explore the possibilities. Precise goals are not set, but the teacher makes sure that each child is engaged in constructive learning. Ian, Graham and Colin are interested in the man-made structures along the river, and they write to the museum and local industries for information. Audrey, Janet and Alison use their measurements to draw a map 250 times smaller than the real thing. This competence has grown over a long period of planned experience and teaching. These children have had 6 years of school experience, designed to equip them with the basic skills and to enrich their individual personalities. From the very first day, encouraged to work with different media, the 5-year-old has few inhibitions, painting spontaneously about the world. All sorts of material is used, even junk. Manipulatory skills become more refined. Reading schemes, themes and projects are all given an artistic dimension. Art is a vital way of exploring new ideas. Sewing is an activity for both girls and boys. They learn a variety of crafts and new techniques are introduced by the teacher. This group learn the art of marbling, a part of bookbinding. Once a technique is acquired by a few children, they can teach it to others. Plasticine modelling leads on to the use of clay. Models show a careful observation of detail. Hands develop skill and sensitivity. 5-year-olds love dressing up. For them, fact and fantasy are closely interwoven. Through such play, the child learns about himself, his capabilities, and his relationship to the world. Dance, drama, and movement help to enlarge the child's scope for imaginative expression. Writing develops from talking, and in the earliest stages there is practice in left-to-right patterning, then letter formation, and copying. The content is from the child's verbal expression of ideas. They progress to writing for themselves, using word books and dictionaries. Many 6-year-olds have already developed a clear and pleasing style. Daily services, this one is based on Noah, are planned and presented by the children. Except for the use of shared areas, there is no central timetabling. The teacher plans the time. Deciding about what, when and how needs skilled professional judgment. The child himself is also guided into taking some responsibility for planning his own work. Children work individually, in small groups, or as a class. The child's progress is watched carefully, records are kept and specific needs catered for. Children are guided into learning. From construction, for example, comes language development, experience of size, shape and balance, measurement and scientific principles, and is also a starting point for written work. Water and sand bring early first-hand experience of such things as volume, floating and sinking, erosion, or sheer fantasy, but always enjoyment. According to the old saying, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And here, insight into balance and weight is gained by doing. First-hand experience leads to rich future thinking. Apparatus and materials bring understanding to the learning of mathematical concepts. Some games make good learning situations. Christopher takes his turn in a money-changing game, whilst Tracy and Linda finish a logic game. Work cards are used to structure learning. Once the concepts are thoroughly understood, such things as addition and multiplication facts are learnt and committed to memory. Mothers come into school and give valuable help with certain things, but the teacher has a role which is much more demanding. She must know each child thoroughly and appreciate his level and rate of development, have a good knowledge of educational philosophy and psychology, as well as curriculum, method and organisation. The best teacher-child relationships are based on mutual trust, care, respect and cooperation. This relationship has a direct bearing on learning, particularly on learning to read. The initial approach can set the attitude for life. The library is popular with all ages. The children produce their own books of stories and poems, and these are included on the fiction shelves. Books from individual or class projects become future reference material. Art is a part of this movement scene, and Penny's folder includes astronomy, biology, mathematics, and original writing. Interesting work from all age groups is shared with the rest of the school. Aesthetic display of work gives it added value. This fire collage was the work of several children. The sketches of early uniforms were of secondary importance to the portrayal of each fireman as a definite personality. Moods, ideas and feelings are captured in the children's artwork. Their awareness of design and colour is apparent. An observation hive loaned by the local Beekeepers Association becomes a further starting point for a detailed study. And a beekeeper is another of the people who come in to talk on their special interests. Living creatures are guaranteed to arouse curiosity and add a vital and fascinating dimension to a school. Special talents and knowledge are shared within the school, but there is also a wider sharing, as in this case where the project on bees is taken to the local field centre for a science fair involving many other schools. Bosun the dog and the birds are resident at Hoby. Children, teachers and parents also use the centre for exploring and studying the surrounding environment. Each child's work becomes part of a whole, just as his experience begins to fit together as he learns more about life. A story altogether before going home. The day has been lived to the full. Each child is valued for himself as an individual within the group. child goes out from this microcosm of the world in school into the larger reality. The boundary between the two merges in the study of the environment, as the older group make a second visit to the river to gather more information and follow up such points as estimating how many lily pads cover a given surface area of water. Kenneth is taking more samples of the various creatures to be found at different levels of the river. The teacher tries to deal with questions in a way that generates further questions.
Nicky called me over to see the marsh marigolds growing in the muds by the river. We'd been looking at different shapes of flowers earlier in the day, and Robert and Nicky asked me about the parts of the flower heads, and I showed them the sepals, the stigma, and the stamens. We also compared the different shaped leaves, and growing by the side of the marsh marigolds were some water horsetails, a primitive plant very common to marshy areas. This gave me the opportunity to talk in simple terms about the development of living things, about evolution. This intrigued Nicky, particularly when I said that these plants would have been part of a dinosaur scenery.
We sketched some of the flowering plants found on the banks of the river. Groundsel, hawthorn, yarrow, common daisy, stinging nettle, buttercup, comfrey and meadowsweet, forget-me-not, ground ivy, herb robert, white dead nettle, germander speedwell and lady smock, kingcup and dandelion.
This is the second corpse to be found. Attempts were made to dissect a dead pike found on the first visit, but the stench was too repulsive even for the children. Tim, fishing for snails, is fascinated to find out about the lid at the front of the body of the great pond snail, which when closed effects a waterproof seal. Children are inveterate collectors, and they have to be discouraged from collecting too many living things. Mr. Morris explains the importance of conservation, as he returns most of the fish to the river. The children are always expected to tidy up and leave things as they found them.
Robert, Martin and Nicky fished a few small creatures at random out of the tank with their pipettes and examined them carefully. They had enjoyed their trip to the river, but hadn't really focused in on any particular aspect until this moment. Among some of the specimens viewed under the microscope were water fleas, which were actually producing young as they watched. We isolated some of the fleas into containers to see what percentage of young survived. Both Nicky and Martin asked how the water fleas reproduced, and we began a count of the young. This was easy to do because we could see inside the transparent water fleas. Was the number carried by each parent a random number, or were they the same in each? Elsewhere in the school, a group of younger children had been keeping chicken eggs, which now began to hatch, and we went to see. The chicks gave us a chance for comparison. As we walked to the incubator, Nicky and I talked about the different life cycles of some common creatures like butterflies and moths, and some water creatures such as frogs and toads. One or two of the chicks had died in the egg, and we took these eggs back to our base. We immersed one of the eggs in vinegar to soften the shell. carefully cut out a window in the shell to look directly into the egg embryo. This process fascinated the group of children who had come to watch. They were enthralled by the process of delicately removing the shell without breaking the inner sac that surrounded the embryo chick.
Audrey wants to know the names of her collection of water plants so that she can plot them together with the sightings of various creatures on the large-scale map. Some reference books are better than others. Children of this age tend mainly to use pictures for identification. Started to build a scale model of the river site. Contours have been taken and translated into a three-dimensional representation, built up with polystyrene tiles. The local industry has sent a helpful letter in reply to the request for information. These children, together since they were 5, have become great friends. And like most people, they take some time off to enjoy a joke. They often work as a group and have found that each has different strengths, which are complementary. Some folk, however, rarely waver from the task in hand. Claire and Vicky use their plant sketches to do coloured ink drawings. But they need more variety, so they make a special trip to the river with the teacher. Extreme care is taken to dig up the complete route. They need somewhere to keep the plants, so they design and make a greenhouse themselves. Is used for all kinds of plants. Work on propagation may continue for several weeks, but eventually the plants will be taken back to their natural habitat. Some, like Chris, have worked at several things, whilst others have stayed consistently with one aspect. The model demands careful calculations and intricate craft work. Dimensions have been handed over by Audrey and Janet, who gathered them on site.
My work with the chicken eggs had caught the children's imagination and stimulated their curiosity. One afternoon, Martin and Nicky got another egg which had failed to hatch, and after attempting unsuccessfully to copy the technique I had shown them, set about removing the whole egg case. Julie and Chris were absorbed in the operation. The interest in the eggs had only concerned a small group of children up to this point. At no time had Mr. Morris been involved in the activities, so when something really interesting happens, like the removal of the dead chick, Nicky fetched Mr. Morris to see what they were doing. Here, the teaching role was reversed, with the teacher finding out by asking questions, and the children answering from their experience and observation. Julie, in particular, was fascinated by the limp body. She had an insatiable curiosity about the embryo and needed to go further in her questions in trying to get some understanding.
The children move purposefully but quietly about the school. The bounds are sufficiently definite for stability, but wide enough to allow for initiative and responsibility. The children take down previous work to make way for the new display. Teachers try to give a genuine appraisal of work, but children are their own keenest critics, and Diane doesn't completely approve of her drawing, a charcoal representation of an insect's view of kingcups, cat's tails and other grasses. Children of this age are able to mount their own exhibitions of work effectively. Learning continues as they discuss, explore and record their observations and ideas. The boys making the model have looked into the history and geography of the site, also making use of local libraries in their own time. Julie starts to type out some of the written work.
Stone to stone across the shallow part of the river. The noises of a fisherman walking through the bank's growth. As he moves, he frightens a sleeping skylark. At this part of the river, the water is motionless.
Going either in or on the water. Water crayfoot, water soldier, brookline, ivy-leaf duckweed, common weed, and has got very powerful hind legs on an oval body 2 centimetres long. The baby water boatman is called a nymph and is born on a reed or underwater plant. Water boatmen dive and hunt tadpoles.
Cuts them by the way. It has 2 claws at the front rather than like a lobster. They are like a lobster in another way too, that they are scavengers, which means they eat bits and pieces at the bottom of the river.
And 2 big ones just behind. At the back they have 2 flippers to propel them along through the water. Cyclops sometimes have 2 egg sacs at the back, and we counted about and its liver, its kidney, and its intestines, and its heart. Then we cut its head off, and its tail. After that, we pulled out its backbone and its bottom layer of teeth. After examining
Mark, Chris and Stuart want more facts about river and pond life and use a tape slide pack. Children are encouraged to examine information closely and not to always accept someone else's point of view. They learn to use their own critical faculty and find out things for themselves, as for example Julie and the embryo chick.
The next time I visited the school, the interest in the study of eggs was still strong, and I took the boys out to the school playing fields to look around the hedges for insect eggs. We found quite a few types of insect galls and plenty of leaves that had been chewed by caterpillars. Chris also came across some cuckoo spit, which was another good example of a different life cycle. Nicky found a caterpillar too, and took it back to the classroom for the afternoon to observe and study and perhaps identify.
The teacher gathers the written work together, accounts, poems, prose, marks and sorts it. Then he helps the children to record an explanatory tape, to be used in conjunction with the finished exhibition. This particular teacher feels obvious enthusiasm for the study of the environment, but it is enthusiasm itself which is contagious and enlivens all areas of the curriculum. Tangible evidence lies a wealth of less apparent but more valuable learning, a type of learning which can be transferred to future situations. The study could continue to expand indefinitely, but there is now a sense of urgency to bring things to a clear presentation and so communicate it to others. The model serves a very definite purpose as the focal point for display. And then children come in groups to look and to listen. For these children, a second-hand experience, but one which holds the promise of exciting future work as they continue to grow as responsible, sensitive and thoughtful individuals.